Hey, welcome to That One Time, the place for unforgettable moments and stories worth sharing. Funny, touching, surprising, just like life itself. Grab a seat, get comfortable, and let's dive in. That evening, on a July Monday, Olivia Smith was pierced by the sensation that she had died. It happened suddenly, in the midst of routine. She was quietly grumbling, sorting through the bag of her husband, who had returned the day before from a sanatorium where his mother had been staying. He's 30 years old and still like a little child, she thought, going through the things. Why do I have to do everything? Eleanor Victoria must have slipped in her dirty laundry so she could travel light. Arthur, engrossed in the blockbuster on screen, heard neither her grumbling nor the surprised cry that followed. "Oh," Olivia exclaimed aloud, and to herself she added bitterly, "Well, there's your O. There you go, you trusting idiot. Dreamed of an ideal family life? Here, sign on the dotted line." Among her mother-in-law's belongings, she discovered lingerie so miniature that the ample Eleanor Victoria could hardly have pulled it onto her arm. This discovery was a revelation. It was as if scattered puzzle pieces instantly fell into place, revealing the full picture of their family life, which had recently seemed so perfect. Arthur was cheating on her. He was hiding behind plausible excuses, basely betraying their 7-year marriage, their shared years that had seemed so happy. He didn't care about their feelings, about how they had overcome difficulties together, how they had sincerely rejoiced in each other's successes, without counting who contributed more to the family. Even the absence of children, which worried both mothers, they saw as temporary. After all, Olivia was only 18 when she got married, and only recently had thoughts of starting a family begun to cross her mind, although Arthur hadn't brought up the topic. Now, the question of children had receded into the background entirely. Olivia faced a far more pressing problem. Her first impulse was to unleash a grandiose scandal on her husband, one that would make the devil sick, to just walk into the room and slap Arthur right across the face with this piece of evidence. But the initial angry impulse quickly subsided when she realized she was still holding the rival's lingerie. It felt unbearably disgusting. Olivia crumpled and threw the evidence of betrayal back into the bag, recalling old basketball lessons. A fraction of a second later, the compromising material was back where it had been so unexpectedly retrieved. Suddenly, Olivia found it hard to breathe. Fortunately, the washing machine was in the kitchen, and overcoming the pain in her chest, where a wound from betrayal now gaped, she took a few steps and sank onto the small sofa. Maybe none of this was Arthur's fault. Maybe her mother-in-law accidentally picked up her roommate's lingerie? Who knows, maybe the room was cramped or there was only one wardrobe for two. Although relations with her mother-in-law had become quite normal recently, Olivia didn't want to call Eleanor Victoria and clarify if such a funny mishap could have happened. For some reason, she felt ashamed. Surprisingly, she felt as if she herself was to blame for everything. Loud sounds from an adventure film came from the room, making it difficult to concentrate and calmly think about how to behave with her husband and how to punish him if he had indeed decided to have some fun on the side. Olivia meticulously sifted through all the soul-scratching moments in her memory, which had been happening more and more often lately. The most important thing was her husband's regular absences. For about a month, Arthur had spent almost all his leisure time without her, citing some strange reasons for his absences. Individually, they might have seemed valid, justified, but there were simply too many of them. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, her husband would say something like, "Honey, I'm going to the dacha in the morning. Fetch some water, water the beds while there's water." Or, "I'll stay a bit late at work." The boss was accommodating with the schedule before the weekend. Arthur also mentioned promising to help a friend, or that they were having a team-building event at work. Yes, all these peculiarities had lasted for about a month, and in the last 2 weeks, his sense of filial duty had suddenly sharpened. While Eleanor Victoria was resting at the sanatorium, he drove to her apartment every other day to water the flowers. You see, it was hot outside. The apartment turned into a sauna at noon, and his mother's favorite plants might suffer. Even the owner herself didn't care for these violets so tenderly. Now Olivia clearly saw the strangeness of her husband's behavior. Usually the flower care fell on her shoulders, but not this year. Arthur, hugging her affectionately, said that she was already very tired and these chores were no burden to him at all. And Olivia had suggested moving her mother-in-law's beloved flowers to the bathroom where it was cooler and turning on grow lights for them there. But her husband objected to this quite reasonable suggestion. He seemed to argue soundly. Water and electricity unsupervised were not the best option, but still, her heart was uneasy. Olivia was very worried and didn't know what to do. It would be good to talk to someone, get outside advice, but who to turn to? The most obvious, but also the most unfortunate option was to call her mother. Upon learning of her daughter's suspicions, she would get very upset, drink valerian drops, her blood pressure would rise. No, her mother must not be worried under any circumstances. Olivia didn't have close friends with whom she could discuss such a delicate topic. Acquaintances, of course, she had plenty, kind and friendly women, but she wouldn't dare to talk about family problems with any of them. It would evoke unnecessary pity, and the leakage of personal information wouldn't be ruled out either. Her reputation as a happy, prosperous woman would go downhill. The CEO had a peculiar quirk. Only people who, in his opinion, had everything in order could hold key positions. Harmony at home, he believed, had a beneficial effect on work. After a divorce or less significant troubles, like a revealed affair, employees were transferred to other positions. Formalities were observed. The salary didn't seem to be lost, no bad records appeared in the work history. But Olivia absolutely did not want such changes, so there was no one to wait for hints on how to live on. She would have to manage on her own. Gray spots danced before Olivia's eyes, heralding a migraine. The woman winced. That's all she needed. If the pain flared up, she would be completely incapacitated for a couple of days. And tomorrow there was a meeting with the commercial director. How inconvenient everything was. And all because of this discovery, damn it. More precisely, because of Arthur and his infidelity. Speaking of the devil, the culprit of Olivia's headache appeared in the kitchen. He acted as if nothing had happened. He turned on the kettle, made a couple of sandwiches, glanced at his bag, and addressed his wife. "Olivia, forget about the chores. I'm going to Mom's tomorrow. I'll throw everything in her washing machine there, so I don't have to carry it back and forth. And anyway, let's go watch the movie. It's really good. I didn't even expect it." Arthur began to briefly retell the plot, but Olivia interrupted him. She didn't have the strength to listen to empty chatter after discovering the compromising material. "No thanks. I think I'll lie down here instead. I'm a bit tired. It was a tough Monday." "Okay, then I'll turn the sound down. And you don't turn on the washing machine either. How can you rest with it running? Should I turn off the light?" Olivia nodded, feeling a pang of pain. She didn't feel like talking to her cheating husband at all. Arthur placed the prepared food on a tray, picked up the bag, and left the kitchen, closing the door behind him. In the darkness, the headache receded slightly, and the woman didn't even notice herself falling asleep. In the morning, Olivia woke up, mentally relieved that the migraine seemed to have decided to spare her. The night's rest turned out to be surprisingly beneficial. Even the certainty of her husband's infidelity was no longer as strong as it had been the day before. On the other hand, the version that someone else's lingerie had gotten mixed up among her mother-in-law's things seemed, on the contrary, the most plausible. Olivia stretched on the sofa, once again glad that she had insisted on buying it, and started getting ready for work, preparing breakfast. Arthur usually woke up later, and this morning was no exception. By the time her husband appeared in the kitchen, Olivia had already had breakfast, left him food, and was ready to go. "Olivia, don't expect me home early tonight. I'll stop by Mom's apartment right after work, do the laundry, and check on the flowers," he added with feigned concern. "Otherwise, she won't forgive me if anything bad happens to her green pets." Jealousy and resentment surged again. The woman almost recoiled when Arthur, as always, came over to kiss her, but she managed to endure the usual morning ritual. Olivia hurried to work, as she needed to get her usual routine tasks done before the meeting. However, it was difficult to concentrate. Her thoughts kept returning to yesterday's discovery in her husband's bag. At the meeting, the commercial director even made a remark. "Miss Smith, are you not interested in the topic of our meeting at all?" Not at all, Mr. Davies. I'm listening very attentively, Olivia replied, trying to look interested. Strange. You have such a distant look, as if you're far away from here. Knowing perfectly well what and how the commercial director spoke, Olivia recounted several key points. Quite satisfied with the result, Mr. Davies interrupted her and continued his speech. While the man spoke at length, talking in circles, Olivia decided to follow her husband. Fortunately, she finished work earlier, and setting up an ambush near her mother-in-law's house was not difficult. The yard there was a dead end, and there was only one road leading to it, at the turn of which was a cafe with panoramic windows. If she sat in a good corner, the view would be magnificent, and she didn't have to worry about her husband stopping by for pastries. He wouldn't be dragged into a cafe of that kind just like that. After making the decision, the woman calmed down a little and hardly thought about her husband's infidelity for the rest of the workday. Only towards evening did she start trembling slightly. After all, the task ahead was unusual. You don't do something like this every day. Or to be precise, this would be her debut in the field of secret surveillance. At the cafe, Olivia ordered berry juice and a pastry that the seller enthusiastically recommended. Only now did the woman, suspecting her husband of infidelity, realize that, preoccupied with her worries, she had forgotten to have lunch. The strawberry filling in the pastry turned out to be unusually tasty, and the wait was not so agonizing. Noticing her husband's car drive past the cafe, Olivia continued her task. Following him was not difficult. He parked in the paved area, took a sports bag from the back seat, and without looking back, entered her mother-in-law's entrance. A few minutes later, the light in the kitchen windows of her apartment came on. Olivia froze in anticipation. If Arthur had a date, then the mistress should appear soon. On a warm summer evening, there were many people on the street, as the quiet courtyard was a shortcut. Her heart skipped a beat every time attractive women walked past the entrance. However, they all walked past. Only a few guys with beer entered the entrance. Under the cover of passers-by and bushes, the light soon went out, and the woman saw her husband leave the entrance alone, with a clearly empty bag. It seemed he was just waiting for the washing machine to finish. Apparently, no one had come to him, and Olivia couldn't believe that the mistress rival could live in the same entrance of this modest Khrushchev-era building. This version seemed too unlikely, except perhaps for some cheap melodramatic series. Despite the fact that her debut in surveillance did not bring the expected result, Olivia decided to closely observe her husband for a few more days. It wasn't such a difficult task. At least I'll bring clarity to this whole situation, the woman thought. It's okay that I have no experience and Arthur might notice me. I'll explain somehow. The morning surveillance on Wednesday was foiled. Although, of course, the fact that her husband woke up at the crack of dawn to go to the dacha raised suspicion. However, Olivia simply couldn't afford to take time off work. In the evening, Arthur went straight home after work, which somewhat calmed her down. Thursday also brought Olivia no compromising material. Moreover, in these days, her husband visited his mother's apartment only once, as if he felt he was being watched. However, Olivia understood that it was too early to relax. Who knows what her husband's schedule for meetings with a mistress is, if he has one. Mentally scolding herself, the suspicious woman hadn't even checked her husband's phone earlier, but the call history had so many numbers, including recurring ones, that none immediately stood out. Reading messages in messengers also yielded nothing. Olivia knew about online chats with disappearing messages, but the smartphone's browser history didn't record visits to such sites. Realizing that she was just an amateur, not a trained specialist, Olivia decided to go all in and try to disrupt her husband's supposed meeting with his mistress. On Friday evening, she suggested, "Arthur, we've been sitting at home too long. Maybe we could go on an impromptu excursion, a weekend route like that." Arthur smiled guiltily and spread his hands. "No, Olivia, sorry. I'm going to Mom's on Saturday, you understand. I'll come back tired. I won't be up for walks." He continued to explain, "Sunday is also impossible. My colleagues and I agreed to go to a football match. Look at the stadium they've built, like a spaceship. We have to see what our taxes, among other things, are going towards." Olivia felt on her skin that her husband was lying. A lump in her throat made it hard to breathe. So her assumptions were correct. The meeting was scheduled for the weekend. The woman decided to go all in. "Listen, that's just wonderful. I'll go with you to Eleanor Victoria's. It feels a bit awkward. She's coming back in a week, and I haven't visited even once," she added enthusiastically. "After the sanatorium, we can drive around the surroundings, and that will be our spontaneous getaway." Arthur tried to dissuade his wife. "Olivia, you weren't feeling very well at the beginning of the week. I think you need to rest." "Olivia, don't be silly, Arthur. It's even indecent not to visit your mother-in-law even once," she insisted. "Besides, I just need a change of scenery." Olivia hoped she would manage to see her mother-in-law's neighbor. She was very persistent and got her husband's consent to the trip to his mother's. Eleanor Victoria was happy to see both her son and daughter-in-law. They had a wonderful time, walking along the well-maintained paths laid between majestic trees. Even the summer heat in the dappled shade seemed less exhausting. Agile little red squirrels, tamed by visitors, comically scampered along branches and came down to people for treats. Eleanor Victoria brought sunflower seeds and nuts for the walk. She held out the supplies to Arthur and Olivia. "Try feeding these little animals yourselves. They're so funny, they use their paws just like hands." The squirrels fearlessly came down to the outstretched palms, delicately took the treats, and ate neatly, looking up with intelligent eyes. By one of the paths, Eleanor Victoria introduced a woman they met to her daughter-in-law. "This is Annie, my roommate." The lady of almost immense proportions smiled kindly. Olivia almost burst into tears. The hope that the discovered item of women's clothing belonged to her mother-in-law's roommate was shattered. That item clearly could not have belonged to this woman. Trying not to show her disappointment and anger, Olivia continued the walk, but there was no trace left of the former serenity. Saying goodbye to Eleanor Victoria, the couple left the sanatorium grounds, and Arthur, completely oblivious to his wife's changed mood, suggested, "Well, shall we drive around the surroundings as planned?" "Oh, Arthur, I think I've had enough walking. Let's go home instead. I'm also kind of worn out," Arthur added with slight weariness, "and tomorrow I have to go to football. I'm not old yet, but I already have to conserve energy." An irritated Olivia couldn't help but snap, "Yes, you're getting old, and it seems my body is also decrepit." Arthur ignored his wife's displeased tone. He wasn't even bothered by the fact that Olivia didn't talk to him on the way home, attributing it all to her fatigue. Olivia defined the task of following her husband as crucial. Indeed, if he had a mistress and he was supposedly going to football, which he had never been a fan of, it meant he was clearly going on a date. In the morning, Arthur got up very early, even earlier than his wife, and she was woken by the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. When she entered the kitchen, the man had almost finished breakfast. "All right, honey, I'm off," Olivia remarked sarcastically. "Isn't it a bit early? As I recall, the football match starts in the evening." The man tried to speak convincingly and calmly. "Well, we'll gather first, chat, and then head to the stadium." The woman didn't make any more sarcastic remarks so as not to alarm her husband and asked, "Are you walking or driving?" "Driving. I'm not planning on drinking and I don't want to deal with taxis or public transport. It's calmer for me. I'm my own boss." "Okay, I understand. Then I'll get to the beauty salon myself. It's fine. Have a good time." Olivia tried to speak as calmly as possible. It seemed to her that her husband didn't even suspect that she didn't trust him and was planning to follow him. The parking lot was a 5-minute walk from the house, and as soon as the door closed behind Arthur, Olivia called a taxi and quickly got dressed. The driver wasn't surprised by the passenger's request. It wasn't his first time participating in surveillance, of course. The man drove confidently, keeping a slight distance from the pursued car. "I had a case with my first wife. She was always running off somewhere. She'd say, 'I'm going to the store,' then to a friend's, then on errands. It was obvious right away that she was lying," he continued, pulling into the parking lot near the supermarket where Arthur had stopped. "It's not pleasant, of course, being a cuckold." Choosing a good spot for observation, the taxi driver turned off the engine and continued his story. "So, my wife says she's going to the store again. and I think she's running off to the children's home for the mentally disabled. Her child lived there," he added bitterly. "She put him there because it was hard for her, and only someone who has faced such a misfortune themselves can judge her for that." "Well, back then I was like, in a white coat, playing the saintly martyr. I almost went crazy. How could this be? They kept such a secret from me." Both Lucy and her mother were silent. The taxi driver lit a cigarette. "I caught my wife at the gates of that almshouse and made a scene. She didn't even try to justify herself, just said she knew we'd get divorced anyway. And whether it was because of the truth or a lie, what difference does it make?" The driver continued his confession, ignoring the growing ash column. "I don't know what I would have done if she had told me the truth back then, when we were dating. Maybe I wouldn't have married her. Or maybe on the contrary, I would have asked her to introduce me to the child." He sighed. "Now I think I could have understood everything if only Lucy had been honest with me. But no, it was easier for her to deceive me. What would you have done in my place? Could you have forgiven her?" Olivia didn't know how to answer the taxi driver correctly, but her husband, appearing in the store doorway with 2 enormous bags, spared her from having to voice an opinion, especially since it wouldn't have been absolution for the man anyway. Arthur, not expecting to be followed, didn't look around, quickly walked to the car, put his load in the trunk, and drove on. The taxi driver, keeping a short distance, followed. He didn't say anything more, reliving the events of the past once again. The car turned off the highway onto a road perfectly familiar to Olivia. Now another 12 kilometers from the turn, and the energetic garden cooperative would appear. Her mother-in-law was allocated her legal 600 square meters there back in Soviet times. Olivia used to go there even before she was engaged, when she had just started seeing Arthur. Eleanor Victoria didn't burden her much with work back then. And even now, she prefers to tend to the greenhouse and other plantings. She hasn't grown potatoes on her property for a long time, filling the freed-up space with berry bushes. She has honeysuckle, strawberries, currants, and raspberries with gooseberries there. How could a devotee of Chekhov's talent be without it? The newfound dacha enthusiast, turning on his indicators, the family car turned towards the dacha area. Continuing the surveillance in a taxi was too noticeable. Olivia asked the taxi driver to stop, and having paid, hurried towards her mother-in-law's plot. "Good luck," the driver wished. "Remember that everything always happens for the best." Olivia hurried towards her mother-in-law's plot and saw Arthur drive the car behind the gate. She rushed to the overgrown lilac bush by the abandoned dacha diagonally opposite, from where she could see what was happening. Fortunately, her mother-in-law hadn't yet replaced the fence from the street side, which was a low picket fence with metal profile sheets, and everything was almost in plain sight. Olivia almost screamed with anger when a woman in a crop top and shorts fluttered out onto the porch of the dacha house. The stranger's physique indicated that she could very well be the owner of that ill-fated find. Smiling, the mistress took one of the bags from Arthur. It was obvious they knew each other, but the phrases they exchanged were indistinguishable. The deceived woman left her hiding place and headed towards the dacha to stage a loud scandal for her traitor husband and his paramour. But she froze in place. Her father, whom she hadn't seen for 3 years, appeared on the porch. It was then that he basely announced to her mother that he had met and fallen in love with someone else. He said that his daughter was already grown up, and nothing held them together anymore, so he was leaving, taking the family savings as compensation for half the apartment. Olivia had tried to influence her father then, begged him not to act rashly, implored him to think about the severe blow he was inflicting on the wife he had lived with for so many years. She threatened to stop communicating with him if he destroyed the family. Useless. Peter Michael abandoned his wife and tried to continue contact with his daughter, congratulating her on holidays. But Olivia blocked his number. Then other numbers from which he called met the same fate. Soon her father stopped trying to contact her. Meeting her father's colleague, she learned that Peter Michael had quit his job and moved out of town somewhere. Veronica Stephanie would probably have gone crazy if not for the support of her daughter, who practically lived with her for several months and made sure she didn't do anything to herself. It's not easy to forget happy years of marriage erased by infidelity. Mom sobbed on her daughter's shoulder. Can you imagine? He said he met the love of his life. And who was I to him then? Just a passerby? An incubator for his only daughter? Upon hearing this news and seeing her mother in such a state for the first time, Olivia was in shock. She had always considered her parents' marriage unshakable, as solid as a rock. However, it turned out that all the years of family life could be very easily erased with one word. A weight lifted from Olivia's heart because of how tenderly her father hugged the woman she didn't know, how he kissed her on the shoulder, and how readily he took the bag from her. It was obvious that this was the very rival, or in his words, the love of his life. Arthur looked at this outrage completely calmly, and soon all three headed into the house. They didn't close the door, and Olivia followed them in, greeting them with a voice ringing with indignation. "Hello, private company." She saw astonished faces. Arthur was the first to react. "Olivia, how did you get here?" "Well, I was sitting at home, bored. I thought, why don't I go to the football match with my husband too? And here it's some kind of tango for three, not a football match behind the bushes." "Olivia, daughter, hello," Peter Michael exclaimed, catching himself. "I'm very happy to see you." He continued, introducing his companion. "Please meet her. This is Sophia, Sophie. And this is my daughter, Olivia, my pride. This is the one I've told you so much about." Olivia managed to make out that the woman in the top and shorts was roughly her age, and she didn't stand on ceremony. "So this is her, the love of your life? The golden hand, foot, or what part of her body charmed you?" Olivia turned to her husband. "I won't say it's nice to meet you, because I'm disgusted to see her in you, Arthur. And you've disappointed me greatly. I would never have thought you'd be entertaining your father-in-law's questionable friend and his girl at your mother's dacha." "Don't you dare talk about Sophie like that," Olivia's father protested. "Oh, as if she's a delicate violet. By the way, Sophie, did you lose your pants from disgust?" She looked at her husband. "My Arthur apparently accidentally picked them up along with some dirty towels. Is it inconvenient to do laundry here? Or is Sophie afraid of overworking her golden hands?" Peter Michael demanded, "Olivia, stop. Enough of your malicious talk. Your husband is helping us at my request, and there's nothing wrong with that," he added, defending Arthur. "A wonderful and responsive person. He is acting mercifully, unlike you, who are showing callousness and malice towards an innocent person." "Well, I'd be ashamed to call your Sophie innocent. To take a husband from a strong and prosperous family, to force him to quit a normal job with a stable income," she continued, pointing at Sophia. "To force him to live not in a comfortable apartment, but in a dacha house with a bio-toilet and a shower from a tank. Forgive me, but not in her first youth." "Well, yes, wonderful, nothing to say. So Sophie is simply a champion at improving living conditions?" Olivia scoffed. "Maybe she should even get a medal for her contribution to a happy approach to the grave?" Peter Michael's mistress was uncomfortable, but she remained silent. Olivia's dad also didn't interfere in his daughter's angry monologue, which had shifted the vector of her anger towards her husband. It became clear that the mother-in-law's dacha had become a refuge for the lovers. Arthur lowered his eyes, and Olivia needed no further verbal response. It became obvious to her that her husband hadn't cheated on her with another woman, but he hadn't acted much better. With Eleanor Victoria's permission, either out of a sense of male solidarity or for some other reason, he was enabling his father-in-law and his paramour. "You secretive ones," Olivia gasped. "How long have you been hiding this dacha haven for lovers from me? A month? More?" "Daughter, calm down and let's talk," Peter Michael suggested. "It's not all so straightforward." "Yes, I bought all sorts of goodies," Arthur announced. "Indeed, let's discuss everything at the table." Olivia didn't miss the chance to speak out once more about the hated destroyer of her parents' family. "I will not sit at the same table with that Sophie with the golden foot." The young rival, shrugging, announced, "Pete, I'll go take care of the plantings and pick some berries. Call me if you need help." Arthur gently touched his wife's hand and pleaded, "Don't be angry, Olivia. I couldn't have done otherwise. After all, Peter Michael isn't a stranger," he added, trying to soften her. "And anyway, he's done a lot of good things for us." Olivia pulled her hand away, and without restraint, began to scold. "Yes, he did a lot of good things. I barely saved Mom after his betrayal. I was afraid she'd think of something bad, leave me an orphan. She looked at her father. And it's all because of that Sophie. Turns out he found himself a Galician princess. Peter Michael, taking food out of the bags his son-in-law had brought, set the table and remained silent. The man knew perfectly well that his daughter had a quick temper, but was quick to forgive. He just needed to let her vent. Sighing, Olivia sank into her favorite armchair in her mother-in-law's dacha house and addressed her father. "Well, tell me, newlywed, how did you end up living in the country? It used to be almost impossible to lure you to the dacha even as a guest." She looked around. "And here, I understand, you've been living for a month now, and for some reason you're showering outside and all that." Peter Michael smiled slightly. "You are smart, you figured it all out right away. Sophie and I actually have to hide. We got into a very ugly, terrible situation." He sighed. "Now we have to hide from creditors." Olivia was extremely surprised. "How? You were always a fierce opponent of loans." Her father shrugged. "Well, even old women can make mistakes. That's how it happened." He began to tell the story. "When I left your mother, Sophie and I moved to her city. We moved from rented apartment to rented apartment. I was doing odd jobs, saving money to buy a house within the city limits and start my own business. We even rented a suitable option that was very popular with the target audience. People started coming to us." Peter Michael continued. "But while we were in a practically suspended state, of course, there was no talk of modest advertising or a loud PR campaign. Sophie and I decided to make everything official, buy this house with the plot, and seriously develop everything on a normal scale, not haphazardly. I had little money left. It disappeared somehow unnoticed." He looked at his daughter. "Sophie suggested borrowing from her acquaintances. Then everything happened like in a bad crime movie. We were robbed on the way to the deal. They cut off the car that Sophie was driving with a power of attorney from her friend. The fender was slightly dented, but at least they didn't injure us." Peter Michael sighed. "Ah, Olivia, if you had seen how Sophie defended me, you would never call her bad names. She threw herself at the bandits like a tigress. She threatened and even stung one, saying that if they touched me with even a finger, they wouldn't get anything at all." He spoke with admiration. "It was so brave, so sincere, but so reckless. I was truly scared for Sophie then, and I think I loved her even more. I understand that it might be unpleasant for you to hear this because of your mother, but I don't want to lie to you. In short, they put psychological pressure on us and named a debt amount that was completely unreasonable." Her father spread his hands. "So, as they say, we had to flee from the sleepy city. There weren't many options where we could hide. We just need to lie low until Sophie's friend, who has connections in high circles, returns from a trip to India. She went there for enlightenment," he explained. "One of the main conditions the guru set for her is complete detachment from her usual reality, absolute rejection of all forms of connection with the past. So, I had to turn to Arthur as the person closest to me. I was very uncomfortable." Peter Michael looked at his son-in-law. "If it weren't for him, it's unknown whether I'd be alive now or not. I'm very glad that my son-in-law agreed to solve our problem with housing and providing us with everything necessary." He added gratefully, "Many thanks to Eleanor Victoria too, even huge thanks. She understood our situation, allowed us to stay here. No one would think of looking for us here, so we can relax without stress." Her father sighed. "I understand that Sophie and I are essentially a heavy burden on your family's budget, but I promise, as soon as our situation improves—" He spread his hands, indicating that he expected no compensation. Olivia clarified, "Messed up, Dad? And couldn't you go to the police?" She insisted, "If these bandits damaged the car, especially someone else's, and tried to intimidate you, then they should be held accountable. There must be some way to deal with them. I think you absolutely must file a report." Olivia continued, "Of course, an investigation on the hot trail won't work anymore, but you have to fight this lawlessness somehow." "Oh, Olivia, how naive you still are," her father said, shaking his head. "Sophie said that their local police station is completely bought off. If you go to them, you could lose your health or even your life, without trial or investigation. But aren't there supervisory bodies above the police? The prosecutor's office or something like an internal security department? Olivia didn't give up. It's better not to go to them either. It's like wading into water without knowing the depth. Her father explained, "Anyway, for a good result, you need to have a direct connection with someone from the staff, then the case won't stall. Once Sophie's friend returns, then we can try." Peter Michael concluded, "And for now, we have to lie low quietly. So that's the situation, Olivia. In my old age, I've ended up in such a mess that I wouldn't wish it on an enemy." He looked at his son-in-law. "Thank you. Your husband and his mother were merciful to me and Sophie. Otherwise, I'd probably be rotting somewhere buried like a dog by now." Her father looked like a tired man, not a happy lover at all. Somehow the resentment for her mother faded into the background. She didn't want to be sarcastic or comment on the boomerang that had returned. After all, this man with anxiety in his eyes remained her dad. The very one who taught her to ride a bicycle, supported her in difficult situations, and explained math and physics problems. He was the only one who supported her desire to marry Arthur at 18. Her mother had insisted then that she shouldn't rush, but her father reminded her that they themselves had gotten married barely a week after their high school graduation party. Arthur, sensing that Olivia's mood had softened, decided not to push his luck further and asked his father-in-law ingratiatingly, "Peter Michael, maybe we could have a bite. Let's at least have some tea with sandwiches." The man was embarrassed, realizing he was trying to treat his daughter and son-in-law essentially at their expense, and added, "Remember, Olivia, what your grandmother used to say, with your own lard right back in your face?" For the first time on this difficult day, the woman smiled sincerely. "Yes, I always used to ask her what mussels were," she recalled. "Grandma would explain it to me every time, as if it were the first time. It was like a ceremony for us." "Dad, I'm sorry, but I really don't feel like eating. Too much news for today, and tomorrow is a work day." Olivia stood up. "I need to get a good rest before it, and before that, I'll need to have a serious talk with Arthur about secrets in family life." However, judging by Olivia's tone, the main emotional storm had passed. Arthur hugged his wife in front of everyone and lowered his head guiltily. Peter Michael began thanking his son-in-law again, not forgetting to put in a good word for him. "Thank you for everything. Go, get some rest." He turned to his daughter. "Just daughter, don't be angry with your husband and don't scold him. He's golden. If anyone is to blame, it's me." Olivia left her favorite armchair and froze, not knowing how to proceed. Should she hug and kiss her dad, who had betrayed her mother many years ago, or just say goodbye? Each of these options seemed unsuitable to her. Sophia, appearing at the doorstep with a basket, diffused the situation. "Here, I've picked berries for you and Eleanor Victoria," she added with feigned concern. "As far as I know, she's supposed to be back from the sanatorium soon. We'll manage to figure out where to move by then so as not to inconvenience her." At the sight of her father's mistress, anger stirred in Olivia's soul again. How cleverly you dispose of other people's property and don't inconvenience yourself. Of course, Arthur put his arm around his wife's waist and gently but persistently pulled her towards the exit so as not to let her erupt with reproaches again. Olivia didn't resist, feeling terribly tired from both the surveillance and the news that had fallen upon her. Peter Michael went to see his daughter and son-in-law off to their car. With a gesture, he asked Sophie to stay in the house so as not to provoke another outburst of hatred. On the way home, Olivia tried not to show her irritation at the situation that had developed in her life. Her husband turned out to be faithful, and she mentally praised herself for not sharing her suspicions with her mother. However, how to react to her father's partial return was completely unclear. Fearing that the berries, distracting from the conversation with Sophie, were not sincere, she thought, she brought the berries as if she'd picked them at her own dacha, generous with other people's property. At home, Arthur tried to anticipate his wife's every wish to improve her mood. After dinner, he finally decided to ask for forgiveness. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you about Peter Michael right away. I was afraid you'd be angry." "You were right to be afraid," Olivia replied. "For me, Dad's action was the end of my childhood. You know, For a long time I thought I wouldn't even talk to him, even if he begged for a meeting, she sighed. But then I ran into him and I felt sorry for him. Oh, I'm afraid this Sophie clearly doesn't have pure intentions living with my father in a house with partial amenities. Arthur tried to justify his father-in-law's new paramour. Olivia, you yourself understand that judging a person by appearance isn't entirely fair. It seemed to me that Sophia is very tender towards Peter Michael. He continued, she cooks food and keeps the dacha tidy. And anyway, my dear, I think you're being picky about her. She had a very difficult past, but she didn't become embittered. Can you imagine, at 18, she had an elderly grandmother, a younger sister, and a younger brother to care for. Arthur spoke convincingly. Despite all this, Sophie managed to get an education herself, albeit a vocational one, but in a sought-after profession. Well, I'm completely uninterested in the biography of that schemer, Olivia exclaimed. Arthur, have you fallen under her influence too? How predictable you men are. She looked at her husband reproachfully. A sly woman is pulling the wool over your eyes, and you're ready to defend her and ruin families because of her. Olivia, you just didn't see how tenderly she cares for Peter Michael. It's impossible to fake, Arthur insisted, and how she defended him during the attack. But you didn't see it, Olivia reasonably countered. Fear has big eyes, and it's quite possible that the incident was completely different in reality. The woman was angry and didn't want to elaborate on the topic of her father's relationship with his girlfriend at all, so she concluded, all right, maybe it's none of my business. I'll just tell you one thing. She looked at her husband. Perhaps it would be reasonable for my dad and this girlfriend of his to rent a dacha in the same development. I think there were several options there. Arthur supported his wife's idea. Of course you're right. My mother is used to being alone everywhere, both in the city apartment and at the dacha. She won't like it if someone else is managing her territory at the same time. He suggested a solution. I'll post an announcement in the dacha chat now that we'll rent a dacha for at least the rest of the season. Anyway, I'll be driving Mom and I can drop by Peter Michael's at the same time. Well, and then, as your dad said, this neighbor's influential friend will return, and maybe the whole situation will be resolved peacefully. Arthur suggested further, actually, you and I have bank accounts, and we could withdraw money and help Peter Michael out. Are you serious? Olivia exclaimed. Dad betrayed me and Mom. You haven't experienced even 1/100th of the emotional suffering we have. She was indignant. And now I'm supposed to give him my and your savings? And lose interest too? They'll get nothing, not money. All right, honey, calm down. I understand. We won't touch the accounts, Arthur hastened to assure her. When talking to and meeting with her mother, Olivia was afraid of letting slip that she knew where her father was. And Eleanor Victoria also kept Peter Michael's secret. They couldn't rent a comfortable dacha, but Arthur was offered a neglected plot almost at the edge of the development practically for free, just for the cost of water and electricity. The location would have been terrible for people who went to the dacha for the harvest. But for forced fugitives, it was hard to imagine a better option. Peter Michael and Sophia, gathering their few belongings, moved to the new place. Arthur continued to provide them with everything they needed, and soon this began to greatly irritate Olivia. Firstly, the money was taken from the family budget, which she didn't like, and secondly, and most importantly, the woman found it repulsive to defend her father and his mistress. Olivia felt that by doing so, she was betraying her own mother. Keeping the secret was becoming increasingly difficult, especially since her mother-in-law planned to celebrate her anniversary at the dacha in early August. Because of this, Olivia was worried. A meeting between her father and mother absolutely could not be allowed. A week before the celebration, the woman asked Arthur to take her to the dacha to have a serious talk with her father. She wanted to firmly explain that the following weekend, he and this Sophie with the golden foot should stay in the house practically without leaving. Leaving her husband and mother-in-law, she headed towards the line of abandoned dachas. The street there was almost impassable due to overgrown sea buckthorn and lilac bushes, but the lush vegetation provided welcome shade in the August heat. Olivia walked unhurriedly, rehearsing what and how she would say. Almost at the very gate of the required plot, the woman heard a hated voice. Olivia was about to go in and tactlessly interrupt the conversation, but some eighth sense made her stop. Her father's mistress's words were very unexpected. "No, Mark, I told you it's not working out yet. That annoying Olivia is ruining my whole plan." She spoke with irritation. "If it weren't for her, I would have gotten everything out of these fools by now. As it is, I have to live at someone else's dacha, go to the toilet outside, wash when the water in the tank heats up. The worst thing is that I have to look into the eyes of this elderly idiot with devotion." Sophie continued to complain. "At least because of this heat, any attraction he has to me disappears, and I don't have to go to bed with him. Although it's not even a bed here, it's sheer mockery." She changed her tone to affectionate. "Oh, my dear Mark, you probably won't even recognize me after these few months. I haven't been to a spa, I haven't been to fitness, and I haven't even visited a beautician. A complete scarecrow. But for this fool Pete, it'll do. I just need to persuade him to sell his share of the apartment here, and then we'll get the property. Real estate prices here are almost like the capitals." Sophie dreamed. "With the money we got from the fake robbery, that will be enough for us to leave here and live normally somewhere on the coast." Sophie's intonation changed from irritated to whining, and it was clear how artistically this cynical woman was manipulating her interlocutor. However, this admiration would have been stronger if Sophie were an actress on stage. As it was unclear when her father's paramour was lying. Olivia was almost not surprised by what she heard. She had suspected something like this. Fortunately, she had the sense to record the conversation on her voice recorder. If she wanted, she could make everything out. Towards the end of the conversation, her father's mistress's speech was a continuous string of exclamations and sighs. She talked about how much she missed him. And Olivia became incredibly curious how Sophie would react now if she knew that there was compromising material against her. Restraining herself, she waited until her father's mistress finished the conversation and only then came out of hiding. It was obvious to Olivia that Sophie was extracting money, but proving it was difficult. So, she needed to provoke the greedy Sophie and show her dad the true nature of the woman because of whom he had destroyed a happy family. Deciding that she wouldn't hear anything new, Olivia moved away from the bush and headed towards the house, pretending that she had just arrived and hadn't heard anything. "Oh, hello, Olivia. Please come in. I've made some soup here. It's tasty, I think." Sophie smiled. "Let me treat you for now, and then Dad will come." He went to the spring, thinking no one he knows would meet him there. Olivia didn't say everything she wanted to and clarified, "And how long has Dad been living with you?" Sophie answered evasively, "Nothing interesting." Meeting her father on the forest path, Olivia asked, "Listen to me and try to believe. Sophie is just using you to get money. The attack on you and her was staged, and here at the dachas, she is hiding with you from an imaginary danger." She held out her phone to him. "Here, listen to the recording I made." Peter Michael listened to Sophie's recorded speech, and his face changed. She felt sorry for him, but Olivia didn't stop the recording. It was better to swallow the bitter pill right away. "Yes, daughter, modern technology has come a long way," her father said, trying to find an excuse. "Admit it, you somehow managed to synthesize Sophie's voice to make me quarrel with her." Olivia was discouraged. She understood that her father's feelings for the arrogant, unprincipled liar were deep. All attempts to tell him or even provide evidence that his mistress intended to become the owner of elite real estate at the expense of others would be met with displeasure and even scandals. She had to somehow convince her father, open his eyes. "Dad, I beg you, don't rush to get money for her. She'll come up with something else to fleece you." Olivia proposed a plan. "So I'll set up a test for her. I'll say that we've been brought money to pay off the debts, and you and Arthur will watch her to see how she acts." She added, "It would be good if a few strong guys could help us. I think that's doable." "Dad," Olivia replied, seeing his hesitation, "let's go to our place for now to discuss all the details." Without looking into his overgrown house, Peter Michael headed towards his son-in-law's place, accompanied by his daughter. In the evening, his mistress again noticed that Peter Michael was cold towards her but didn't pay much attention to it, especially since this detachment suited her completely. Only when the man announced that his son-in-law had agreed to provide the money, but only in cash, Sophie almost jumped for joy. My beloved, my sunshine. Now we can return to our usual life. Isn't it a miracle? Arthur smiled. So far, everything was going exactly as they had planned. Thanks to a friend of his, he managed to invite former Special Forces soldiers to participate in the fraudster's detention. When Sophie's accomplices arrived at the dacha, squeezing with difficulty down the narrow street, the brave guys immediately subdued them. They treated Sophia very delicately, and Peter Michael, coming up close, announced, "You, Sophie, despite your wise name, wanted to fleece me again. But you didn't realize you talked too much and in the wrong places." He pointed at his daughter. "Fortunately, Olivia overheard your disgusting conversation. So if you don't want to end up in prison for fraud and drag those fools down with you, then pay me back what you stole from me with the help of your buddies." Sophie had no choice but to write a receipt. A tired Peter Michael asked Arthur to drive him to the city and hurried to his wife, buying a luxurious bouquet of flowers on the way. "Veronica, it's as if cold water was poured over me," he said. "Let's try to start our relationship anew." Veronica Stephanie smiled at her ex-husband, and he thought he had found the key to her heart. But the woman suddenly announced, "Actually, I've already started a new love story, and you don't fit into it." She looked at him calmly. "So if you want, we can formally divide the property fairly." She added, "After all, during the divorce, you took almost everything you brought in, and I didn't fight for a single thing. Since they were important to you, you took them." Veronica Stephanie finished, "And now you suddenly realized you undersold yourself, ended up empty-handed. Although with the amount returned by Sophie N.,